Of my mind. I wish I could have just had a baby. Everything would have just fallen into place. My world would have centered on them. My aim would have narrowed. My energy would have just naturally concentrated onto wherever it needed to be. It's all I ever wanted. Ugh, it's hard to let that go. I mean, duh, I was adopted. Of course I should just adopt. It's almost like I jinxed myself. I dreamt about being a mother my whole life, only to not be able to. Like, what a cruel joke. I guess there's a lesson in there somewhere. Oh, Marshall. Oh, here I go with the tearing up again. Thanks, honey. I mean, I don't want to sound corny, but it wasn't love at first sight. It was something more. It's hard to explain. But I guess we never really tried to explain it. And that was kind of the magic of it. We met on the dance floor. Who does that? It was salsa night at the studio. And for whatever reason, that day, everybody had something else going on. Never saw anything like it before or since. Just the instructor, me, and Marshall. I'm pretty sure we didn't even say hello to each other. We just realized what was happening and smiled at each other. And the instructor put on the music and let us go. I danced my ass off. Pardon me. It was incredible. Marshall was a fabulous dancer. I think we both just realized how surreal and special the moment was. We had both gone there to dance, and that's what we were going to do. I had never been handled by a man like that. So smooth, so sexy, but so professional, and so precise. He really was calculated, but not in a robotic way at all. Maybe I just hung out at the wrong studio, or was always paired with the duds. Whatever the case, I had never experienced that before with another person, on or off the dance floor. It truly was totalizing. And he must have felt that too, because we started dating right after that, and were together until, well, the whole relationship truly felt like a fairy tale. For once in my life, someone was absolutely taken with me. I mean, he adored me. It was too much. I was suspicious. I was really going insane. I thought for sure he must be making other house calls with other women from the studio or the other studios. First, I felt really jealous. Then I felt plain old pathetic. But eventually, I just didn't care. He was so nice to me. After a while, I started to think that he needed me more than I needed him. Like I was doing him a favor. He never touched me. Unless a dance called for it. And if so, always respectfully. He was never inappropriate. I call them house calls because they really were. It was like someone hired him out and sent him over to me. We would set up a day and time to meet. He would come over with fancy, expensive wines and other ingredients. First things first, we wouldn't eat or drink or even talk. We would dance. We danced so much. We knew each other's moves and timing so well, we were like a mirror image. Then he would start in on the ingredients he brought and cook absolutely divine meals. He would even clean up the whole kitchen afterwards. Never let me help. And then more dancing. When it was getting late or I seemed exhausted, he would just let himself out. Never put any moves on me. Never forced me into anything. He was so eccentric like that. I remember he would walk through my garden, always in bare feet, and touch and smell everything. Like really shove his face in there and moan and groan. Oh, did I love that. Oh, did it make me laugh. It was even erotic too, you know? Cannot explain it. He reminded me a bit of Grandma too. Just in love with gardens and food and preparing meals and enjoying them with loved ones. He never tried to fix me either. The number of fixers I've met over the years, I don't get it. Some kind of masculine instinct or something. Marshall would listen to whatever problem I was having and just say it back to me, but in different words. And by trying to coax the problem out of me, he would get a solution out of me too. He was just a really good listener. Kind of like you. Every time I tried to return the favor, he refused. He said he didn't want to trouble me with his silly stuff. I knew it wasn't silly stuff. He was very well respected. He would have other distinguished professors over to the house all the time to go through their predicaments. They always seemed to leave the house happier and more relieved than when they arrived. One night I could not take it anymore. I asked him if he loved me, and he said he loved my liberty. I still to this day do not understand what he was trying to say. Like I said, it was kind of our thing not to let words come between us, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I guess the combination of feeling he was right for me, but never really articulating it with him, it turned me kind of primal. I just jumped him, wrapped my arms and legs around him, kissed him aggressively, like I've never kissed anyone in my life. He didn't shy away. Soon he told me to stop working because he could take care of me. Well, I wasn't into that, but I appreciated the offer. We started living together, and I swear, food started to taste better. Work started to be better. We danced like it was the only thing keeping us alive. We made love like we danced, with passion and precision. Everything was just better. Everything was just falling exactly and perfectly into place. To this day, I am still not completely sure if I was more upset by the fact that I could not get pregnant or that Marshall left me as a result. I mean, he never came right out and said that was the reason he left me, but I cannot help but believe that it was the beginning of the end. I mean, we seamlessly glided right through every stage all lovers do. The first meeting, the courtship, the dating, the marriage, the house, just one after the other. Bang, bang, bang. It was like clockwork. Looking back now, it feels like a dream. But I really don't believe I am idealizing any of it. My years with Marshall were really as wonderful as I remember them, and it is truly all my fault it fell apart. Nothing else can be blamed. I mean, it was not completely my fault, but it was not completely my fault either. No matter how much I focus on the fact that it was really out of my control, I can't help but feel like I could have tried a little harder. There must be an answer out there that I have overlooked, that I can't see, that hasn't been uncovered yet, and I should be right there trying to figure it out. I mean, isn't that just the way this life goes, though? Some people get pregnant, and they weren't even planning for it, while others do everything they possibly can, and it just never happens. I researched extensively and obsessively and tried every option. Ultimately, no one is in complete control of their bodies, but some people really make some things look easier than others, without much hard work on their part. maybe if I was born sometime in the future, someone would have eventually figured out a way for me to control this one part of myself that is disabled. But there is no sense in wishing. I mean, I was successful at everything I ever tried in life because I worked hard at it. It was the first time in my life that I was a failure. And no matter how much hard work I put in, I was constantly failing. I hated the feeling of failure so much that I started to hate myself for feeling it. When Marshall told me that he was leaving, the feeling of failure, which had already crippled me, had now succeeded in crushing me completely. I don't blame him for losing interest in me. I would have too if I was him. I don't hate him for it. I love him more than anything. And I want him to have the family he always wanted and live a happy, complete life. He never told me I was a failure, but I could see it in his eyes and his actions. He had no use for me anymore. He might have been right, because at that moment, I had no use for myself either, and he just didn't know what to do with that. I did bring up the option of adopting, but that was merely my last-ditch effort to salvage what I knew was already over between us. To my shock and amazement, Ava has been my main, if not my only, source of comfort through these times. It was the first time in my life that I really needed her to be a support for me, and she was beside me every step of the way. In my darkest times, when Marshall started to lose interest in me, it was Ava who really stepped up and took control of the situation. I don't know what I would have done if she wasn't there to pick me up when I was at my lowest. She really started to convince me that I did not need to define success in my life by my ability to obtain and sustain a husband or a child. I mean, of course she would say that. She had never put any effort into obtaining either of those things for herself. But nonetheless, it was something I obviously needed to hear at the time. I really started to question my whole value system leading up to that point in my life. For as long as I can remember, I was always so in control of my professional and personal lives, and the dismantling of one really brought my whole life into chaos. I always had such confidence and ease handling any classroom size or age group. There was really nothing about educating children that was intimidating or challenging for me. The students knew I was tough but fair, and aside from a few special cases, I was respected for the work I was doing. I took the same tough but fair attitude to my home life, and Marshall gelled with that perfectly. I mean, we had the typical disagreements, but for the most part, we had our separate roles at home and at work, and it just suited us fine. I want to say that the confidence I had at home was the fact that I knew Marshall adored and respected me. The confidence I had in the classroom was that I thought the students had learned the wrong lessons at home or in the schoolyard, and I was going to set them right. I really thought I was saving the world, getting rid of the bad ideas and disseminating the good. And then, after a long day of saving the world, I would go home to my biggest fan, who I mutually adored. My professional and personal lives were actually balancing each other out, more than I had initially realized. And once Marshall and I started hitting speed bumps, it became blatantly obvious how vital our relationship was to my professional success. At home, I had lost the confidence in my role as Marshall's partner, and once that happened, I was no longer recognizable to my biggest fan or to myself. I had always viewed children as ignorant people who required my guidance in order to be corrected. But when Marshall and I would eventually decide to have our own children, they would of course be nothing short of perfection. As much as Ava tried to reinforce the idea that I was not a failure and was actually perfection in my own right, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer qualified, if I ever was, to right the wrongs of my students. My idea of my students, and children in general, took on a whole new meaning, and I no longer saw them as mere misguided wanderers requiring my insights. They were all incredibly complex, uniquely beautiful, and perfect in their own way. There was no longer anything wrong with any one of them. And so, I completely lost touch with any notion of my role. All of a sudden, I felt like the front of the room was the last place in the world I actually wanted to be. I could no longer see my students as the audience for which I was to direct and command, because I now wanted more than ever to interact with each and every one of them on a personal level. I wanted to hear their side of the story, understand the world from their perspective, and learn about all the other worlds that I had always been keeping quiet. I mean, I hate to say it. I don't hate to say it, but I definitely hate that I have to admit it. When Ava came by the house that one time, unannounced, like she always did, Marshall was there, and it was like he saw a ghost. It was like I ceased to exist. I mean, it happened before, obviously. Any time I was out with Ava, all eyes were on her. But this time, she had my Marshall. It was a real hit. I suppose it was bound to happen. The two closest people in your life are going to meet at some point. The two closest people. You think that would be saying something? Neither of them have ever really shared anything close with me. At least not anything about themselves. They were constantly bringing things for me, constantly listening to my every complaint. Very alike in that regard, I suppose. I guess I just needed to get out of the city. Literally every place was painted with some kind of memory of Marshall. Coincidentally, Anthony had just left Grandma's for the city, and it just felt like the right timing to drop everything, move back, and take over where he left off. It was like a no-brainer. He had kept the garden up all this time, and the soil is incredible. All of Grandma's stuff, everything I needed to grow and can, was still here. It felt like home, when I was completely lost. Probably saved my life. Here's a morbid thought. I couldn't believe it. I asked my doctor, after we tried everything he could think of to help me, whether he liked to dance. And he didn't. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe he didn't like to dance. Couldn't believe how much I cared. Couldn't believe I never asked him before. I haven't done any dancing in like forever. And I think it shows. Physically, mentally, any way you look at it. It just breaks my heart to do it. Still, it has always been that thing which brought me joy. Brought me every good thing I can think of. But who am I kidding? I'm not a dancer. Not the best dancer. Not the best teacher. I don't know what I am. You know how insane I've become? Some days I just sit here on the back porch and just stare out into the sky. I'm not looking at anything. I'm not thinking of anything. I'll watch the clouds as they float by, morphing and changing, never staying the same. I do it for hours. So insane. Just hours of staring and watching my thoughts float by. morphing and changing. I'll laugh or cry or sometimes both. And it's hard to explain, yet so simple and enjoyable. It has really helped